Welcome to KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio and the Southern California Business Report with Yvette Walker, a show dedicated to highlighting successful Southern California businesses and the people behind them.
Welcome and thank you for joining the Southern California Business Report on ABC News and Talks, KMET 1490 AM, 98.1 FM, and KMET TV. I'm Yvette Walker, live, blasting our signal from the center of Southern California, serving a population of over 25 million. Get us crystal clear and on demand by downloading the free KMET live streaming app on Google Play or the Apple App Store. A huge shout out to the team, Mitch, Bill, and Sean, you know I love you. And to our special advisory committee, Bill Morris of UCI School of Business, Diane Cavallo, and Camila Rubio, thank you. Don't forget to check out the Jay Kaplan Show, also on KMET on Fridays at 3. Today, I have the distinct honor and privilege of introducing Shannon Dicus, San Bernardino County Sheriff and Coroner, with an update on new efforts to address law enforcement challenges that include mental health, substance abuse, and illegal marijuana cultivation. Sheriff Dicus was raised in a law enforcement family and has lived in San Bernardino County for over 40 years. In high school, he was a Sheriff's Explorer Scout. After graduating, he enlisted in the United States Army and was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division, where he served as a military police officer at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and in Sinai, Egypt. After his tour of service in the military, Sheriff Dicus worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs Police Department in Loma Linda, California. He was hired by the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department in 1991 and attended the Frank Bland Training Center 106th Basic Academy session. Sheriff Dicus has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Cal State San Bernardino and a master's degree in communications from Cal Baptist University. As an undersheriff, he oversaw the day-to-day operations of the department, as well as the Internal Affairs Divisions, Civil Liabilities Division, and Bureau of Administration Division. One notable project was the jail utilization study done in partnership with Cal Forward to determine the effects of prison realignment and recidivism in San Bernardino County jails. As an assistant sheriff, he was responsible for support operations and supervised 3 deputy sheriffs, the public affairs lieutenant and the legislative liaison who oversaw the Corrections Bureau, court security, crime lab, Coroner, Employee Resources, Sheriff's Academy, Public Affairs, and local law enforcement legislative efforts. As a captain, Sheriff Dicus supervised technical services, communications, records, and the Bureau of Administration. Sheriff Dicus has held a position at every rank in the department, and his past assignments include corrections and patrol in Barstow, Apple Valley, Victorville City, and Victor Valley stations. He worked specialized investigations in narcotics, SWAT, and criminal intelligence. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sheriff Dicus.
Yvette, thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm really excited to talk to you as always.
Well, I'm just so honored that you're here and you're making time to share an update with our audience. But before we go into the meat and potatoes of what it is that we're going to talk about, please share with us a little bit more about your background. What motivated you to reach becoming the sheriff of San Bernardino County as you are today?
Well, Yvette, I can honestly tell you it's not something I planned on, but it's something that really my predecessor, John McMahon, is probably one of the best human beings I've ever met. And when John decided to retire and the things that we're seeing currently in this state, I really felt it was my duty to stay here and work with the folks still doing this job for our community. I don't want to see all the experience leave the building, and work with them and make sure we implement a lot of reforms that are occurring in the state of California, and doing it in a manner that's responsible and taking good care of the public.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that. And you're absolutely right. Sheriff John McMahon is a wonderful human being. So let's get into it. Okay. You talk about, the laws and the bills. Recently, Assembly Bill 1599 was introduced, which set Prop 47 possibly back to the voters. Can you please share with us what the status of that effort is today?
Sure. As far as Assembly Bill 1599 is concerned, it had a number of co-authors, to include Assembly Member Schmitty Smith, was in my area, in my district, up in our Southern California deserts. I was approached by him to come up and testify before the Public Safety Committee in Sacramento in relationship to the bill. And what I wanted to relay to this Public Safety Committee is what's going on as it relates to Prop 47 in our county, and encourage them to follow through with sending it to the voters. I also attended a press conference prior to that with Assembly Member Kiley, who is the main author of the bill.
Okay, so what was the outcome of that effort?
So when I testified before the Public Safety Committee, and I'll roll back just a day or two prior,
Okay.
We had a chance to meet with the chairperson of that committee, which is Assemblymember Reggie Jones Sawyer. And when he was talking to us, he relayed to a number of law enforcement officials that he didn't really feel there was an issue with Prop 47, but he felt that it was delivered in a manner that didn't have capacity. And if you have conversations as it relates to mental health, homelessness, substance abuse, you always end up on the subject of capacity. And there's just not places for these folks. Well, as a result of Prop 47, you see a number of things on the rise. So our citizenry across the board, we all saw national news media, and also here in the state, these large organized retail thefts that occurred just before Christmas time. And there was a lot of direct correlation to Prop 47, because what it did, along with bringing it along with other assembly bills, is that it increased the felony penalty up to $950. It used to be the threshold of $400.
Right.
So by raising it to $950, so imagine a shoplifting circumstance, someone can steal up to $949 worth of property before being subject to a felony. So that was one of the changes Prop 47 brought about. And that's why we think we're seeing the increases in retail theft and a number of those things. On the substance abuse side of Prop 47, made a number of felonies for possession of these illegal substances in terms of drugs now a misdemeanor. So we've seen over time, as the implementation of these things have occurred, you see increased homelessness. And frankly, I see people rotting in their own skin because this lack of capacity that I explained earlier. So we're trying to work with the legislature. And I also try to be one of those people that just don't state the problem, but also potential solutions.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. So when we talk about building capacity, can you please talk about that and what that looks like moving forward?
So one of the things I offer, and if you've heard the governor talk recently about involving the bench or judges in this issue, essentially bringing forth someone that has mental health issues or substance abuse issues, and allowing the bench to essentially sentence them, for instance, to a substance abuse facility or something like that. There's not enough capacity in terms of those types of facilities or infrastructure to make that work. And I think that's what Reggie Jones Sawyer was talking about, is really building that capacity. So it was my hope that we would repeal Prop 47, and then we would turn around, build these capacities, not the cart in front of the horse as we're doing it now. So with that being said, and offering solutions, a lot of people don't want these types of facilities in their neighborhoods. NIMBYism, if you will, not in my backyard.
Right.
What I'm offering is to take a look at jail zoning, where our jails are currently at, and the properties associated around them, and maybe we could build these centers. And these centers would be essentially places that judges could do conservatorships for people experiencing these issues. So we used to have drug court that made people go get substance abuse help. And then they bring back a certificate, and the judge would say, okay, you're not going to have a felony anymore. We're going to give you a misdemeanor. But the felony hanging over their head is what changed their behavior. So with Prop 47 taking that away, now what we're dealing with is people languishing on the streets. So in the governor's new model, if we had a facility that would allow for a conservatorship, then someone would achieve sobriety, but not be able to come out of that facility until they have done all the things that we're asking them to do as society. And same thing for mental health. If someone was experiencing crisis, they could go in there, receive the proper help. The cops don't need to be involved. To be mental health and medical professionals that are working with these people. And then when they achieve a level of consciousness, then maybe also we have like a halfway house, and we start integrating what they need: driver's licenses, jobs, and a number of things as we transition them back to productive members of society.
So let's talk about what those facilities would look like, that those that are dealing with substance abuse problems. Please paint the picture of what those facilities you propose would look like.
Well, I think if we gave our bench officers, all of our judges, essentially a list of the facilities that were available, they could tailor based on what they're hearing in these cases in court to the needs of the person in terms of substance abuse treatment or mental health treatment. And it would depend on the person's level of severity in terms of where they're at in that crisis. And then the judge would be able to move them into a more of a medical environment, not a jail environment, where they're not decompensating but immediately getting treated. And then from the law enforcement perspective, it's always been pushed a lot of crisis centers. If we build it, law enforcement can take these people to these crisis centers. We need to remember that law enforcement can't make anyone walk through the doors. That's why we need our bench officers involved in this, our judges, because we have to make a probable cause arrest. Can you imagine if we just grabbed somebody and took them in there? I mean, we'd be accused of kidnapping and a number of things. So it answers a lot of those questions. But what I envision is these medical facilities that are actually delivering the type of treatment these people need. And when they receive a certain level of sobriety, for instance, that now we start transitioning out of that type of facility and bringing them back into that halfway house model I spoke of earlier.
So can you talk a little bit about what the program would look like and what benchmarks you would be looking to hit and, determine that these people that are in these programs have reached a level of sobriety that can be reintroduced back to the general public?
Well, most of those standards I think we should leave up. And I think this is one of the biggest arguments in California as a whole, is that it's not something for the cops to determine, it's something for the medical staff to determine. And based on their professional opinions, how does that transition look? And I think involving the judge, it would also have to be compared to penalties. So can this person achieve some level of sobriety, for instance, in a 30-day program or 60-day or a year long? I mean, it depends on where we're at. And then conservatorships with mental health are going to be much more difficult than that. Diagnosis from a doctor, where are they at? Can they achieve competency? Where we're going? But for a direct correlation to the public, and for law enforcement as a whole, it would give these people a place to go. We wouldn't see them languishing in the streets. And there are a number of times, even our business community sees these same people over and over again with little or no intervention or help. This would be a way we could directly intervene and help. The way the system works right now with Prop 47, we're not able to intervene. People can continue to do what they do with little or no ability for any type of intervention. So
how would a conservatorship be arranged as you look to assist those that are battling, mental and substance abuse problems?
Well, from the court level, it would actually be a hearing related to the conservatorship and making sure that that is the appropriate level to address that specific subject, maybe based on their criminal history, based on their medical history. A number of things would probably come into the court that would be somewhat untraditional. I think that the governor describes them as care courts. So I think you would see something much different than we're experiencing now. But my concern is you can have these care courts, but without the ability to place these people, then again, we're forcing all of these things that the states traditionally have been responsible for, the local governments, to build this capacity. And I think we need to be addressing that first.
So can you please share with us what is realignment and how does the surplus of tax funds collected play into assisting with this effort?
Well, when I talk about traditionally states' responsibilities, we can start with 1991 mental health realignment and then move forward to 2011 prison realignment. And that's when a number of offenders are moved down to county jails. Well, in county jails, we weren't designed to hold these long-term inmates. So there had to be a number of investments into our local correctional systems. And again, traditionally a state responsibility that as a result of realignment came down to us. Well, Prop 47 is no different. It was another method to keep people out of state prisons. So they continued to realign. We're starting to see that occur with the incompetent to stand trial population as it relates to the Department of State hospitals. And we're also seeing it here locally with children and family services. All these responsibilities are slowly but surely moving down to the locals, and oftentimes without this capacity. When I say capacity, what I'm really talking about is really infrastructure. Infrastructure for these medical facilities like we were talking about earlier. Infrastructure for kids who are in between that incompetence place for going to court, but also don't rise to the level of being held in a juvenile hall. There's a number of those things that are going on in terms of realignment right now that we're struggling with as local governments, both county and city.
So what do these facilities look like, or what would they look like? And how would they work on the premises of existing detention facilities?
Well, what I would envision if we have an old jail or something, it could be remodeled. Maybe it's got multiple floors, but change it into more of a medical environment. Actually, talk to doctors and make sure we're getting the type of treatment facilities. But if you think about a jail as a whole, they have medical facilities inside of them already. They have the ability to feed people inside of them already and take care of folks. And it's just be a matter of maybe changing the cell environment, if you will, to more of a medical suited type of environment. Or if we don't use those facilities, build a specific use facility to be able to take care of these folks. And also think of long-term housing. A lot of these people are going to need the transitional assistant, or what we call through care, that we get them to a point where now it's basic resources, the roof over your head, the ability to feed yourself, introduce you to job training, get you a good job, and then ultimately transfer them back into the community, but stand them up along the way.
So what resources exist today to determine, who has those mental health challenges, and what resources will become available to those that experience it in this environment?
Well, as the governor rolls out his new plan, we're hoping that resources will roll out with that. I know there are a lot of grants available to build these types of facilities. And then as a result of prison realignment, sales taxes come to counties. But when we talk about how we've had to change doing business, oftentimes the price tag is very high. So I'm not sure there's enough money that's going into that system to really accomplish some of the complicated social problems that we have right now. But I can tell you that counties really are trying, and so are the local cities.
Right. And so I know that recently Assemblymember Salas proposed a revisit to vote on Prop 47. Can you please talk a little bit about how that is going, where it is, and how or when it's going to be voted on?
Sure. So one of the things that I find enlightening about this is I always say this: law enforcement is about doing the right thing. It isn't red or blue. And we see this highly polarized political environment. What I think is important to note about Salas's bill as it relates to Prop 47 is that threshold of $950. Salas, being a Democrat, introducing this bill, it shows that both sides of the aisle are seeing some of these issues. And when it shows that we're also working together, which I think all the citizens in the state would expect our government to do. But Salas's bill specifically addressed dropping that threshold back down to $400. Now, that will fix a portion of Prop 47 in terms of property crime, but there are still other things that we're missing, like petty theft with the prior. When I say petty theft with the prior, we used to give people a chance that if they did shoplift, there was the first couple of times that we, took them into court and they got a case, but they were misdemeanor cases. If you continue to do it, you could potentially get a felony and see yourself in state prison. But again, with Proposition 47 and other assembly bills, that was taken away. And now we're seeing really there's getting a citation. There is no threat of prison or any of these other things. And I think that's why we're seeing retail theft go through the roof. So I applaud Salas for taking this on. I just think we're leaving the substance abuse portion out of this, and petty theft with the prior also, in trying to address those things to get the complete package.
So when will Bill 1599 be available for voters to revisit and maybe, change their minds on Prop 47?
So, Yvette, I'd like to tell you that voters are going to get an opportunity to do that. But after testifying before the Public Safety Committee, they, right there before I even left the parking lot, voted the ability down. And in other words, not sending it to the voters to have them take another look at it. And what I think is tragic about that is that, again, everybody talks about evidence-based principles, right? And using data-driven. Well, we saw on national news media these thefts, and a direct result, voters saw that. Again, Assemblymember Salas's bill, people are seeing this and they're expecting change, but yet the Public Safety Committee chose not to send it to the voters.
Oh my goodness. So what are you hearing from business owners as they're seeing this increased theft? It's expensive to be in California, to have a business in California. I can only imagine, the strain that some of these businesses are encountering as a result of these laws.
So Yvette, I'm glad you asked that question, because I don't think a lot of people would really understand what a business owner is facing. So if you talk about property crime overall in California, you're going to hear regularly, well, the property crime is dropping. Well, the reality is these business owners aren't even reporting it. So think about their employees who have to confront these individuals pushing out $950 worth of property, basically, and the potential liability that an employer would take on from doing that. And then ultimately, yes, you stop them, you call law enforcement comes out and does a case. Well, the person knows they're going to get a citation. They could be back again doing it tomorrow because there just isn't a tremendous amount of penalty for these people. They aren't facing going to prison for a long term if they keep up this behavior. There's really no deterrent like there used to be. Now, everybody's going to say, oh, well, that's a cop. They just want to put people in jail. Remember, I'm offering solutions that there are other things to be able to do with these folks. I'm talking about doing things completely different. Now, when we're talking about just basic theft, I think having a strong deterrent like facing prison and bringing petty theft with a prior back is what we should be doing so our business owners can continue to, thrive. That's what public safety is for. Is anybody that wants to live the California dream and comes in here to try to do business, their expectation is to not look over their shoulder. And it should be my responsibility, along with chiefs of police and other sheriffs, to make sure that they're able to do that.
Right. And the way I've seen it is, many times when these thefts occur, there have been instances where some employees have attempted to intervene and it has not turned out well. And there have been other instances where it's just a very hands-off approach. Can you talk a little bit about the dynamic that you've seen and some of, the stories that you've had to respond to in this arena?
Sure. So when this happens, if the employees do a direct confrontation, sometimes that could be potentially violent in a number of ways. Some of these people may be armed. They're certainly caustic in terms of their behavior, just trying to escape with the property or escape being exposed to a law enforcement case or arrest. There's a number of confrontations that occur. And then also just simply reporting it. Like I said, it's almost easier for an employer to take the loss, not expose their employees to that type of liability. And again, overall, it makes it look like property crime's dropping, when in fact, if you talk to our business owners, that isn't the case and that's not their experience.
And so what are you hearing from business owners? Are they expressing any grievances at all? I know you have a lot of support from both sides of the aisle, and everybody in California, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. If you have a business, it matters, right? Because it comes down to the dollars and the cents. Have you heard anything from the business community, basically pleading with you or asking for solutions to this problem?
Oh, absolutely. It's probably one of the biggest topics that we talk about in order to secure businesses. I'm seeing a huge investment by those businesses in private security now, a huge investment in terms of technology, alarm systems, camera systems, and a number of things to try to prevent or at least record evidence for us so we can do these cases and take some of these people to task. It's just really the penalty. There isn't much of a penalty there. And we mentioned early on in my bio the California Forward study. Well, one of the things that came out of the California Forward study is that those people we could potentially help the most, these misdemeanor level folks, aren't even spending 30 days in jail anymore because the folks we have in jail are truly the people we're afraid of as a society. So when you don't spend 30 days in jail, we're not starting an anger management program, GEDs, and a lot of these support services, counseling, drug abuse counseling, substance abuse counseling, you name it. We just aren't able to do those for a long term and really affect change on these people. So the revolving door is really just spinning faster.
So what do you recommend and what advice do you have for voters moving forward when they are wanting to express their desire to consider a revisit of Prop 47 if there is an opportunity to revisit it in the future?
Well, certainly support those bills, but the biggest thing is, and it was a bit disingenuous in the way it was introduced, of the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. We got to read beyond the title because that sounds good. It sounds certainly like something I'd want to vote for. But when you read into the entire act itself, if you will, of the proposition, you start to read that there is a change in deterrence in a number of those things. And as a voter, if you don't agree with that, then certainly don't vote for it. But right now, we need to be talking to all of our legislators, making sure they know how we feel, and we are not okay with business as usual.
Thank you so much, Sheriff. Okay, for those listening, I'm Yvette Walker on Southern California Business Report on ABC News and Talks, KMET 1490 AM, 98.1 FM, and KMET TV, talking to Shannon Dicus, San Bernardino County Sheriff and Coroner, with an update on new efforts to address law enforcement challenges that include mental health, substance abuse, and illegal marijuana cultivation when we return.
The University of La Verne is rated first in California for alumni satisfaction. Learn more about accelerated programs offered online and on campus in La Verne, Irvine, Ontario, Burbank, or College of the Canyons. Visit go.laverne.edu. The University of La Verne. go.laverne.edu.
City of Hope is driven to making a difference in the lives of people with cancer and diabetes. We accomplish this by conducting innovative research and providing outstanding care. If you or a loved one has received a cancer diagnosis, go to cityofhope.org to learn more about how our innovative approach could change your outcome.
Ontario International Airport is onto a better way to fly with over 65 daily non-stop flights to more than 20 major destinations and the easiest airport experience in Southern California. Visit flyonto.com/Ontario to learn more about Ontario International Airport today.
Every 2 seconds, someone needs a blood transfusion. Be on the giving side. Livestream Blood Bank supports patients in 80 Southern California hospitals. Call 1-800-TRY-GIVING for more information and to set an appointment.
Cal State San Bernardino is home to the only school of entrepreneurship in California. With globally ranked degree programs, you can start your journey today to become a successful entrepreneur. Learn more and connect at entre.csusb.edu.
Welcome back. For those listening, I'm Yvette Walker on Southern California Business Report on ABC News and Talks KMET 1490 AM, 98.1 FM, and KMET TV, talking to Shannon Dicus, San Bernardino County Sheriff and Coroner, with an update on new efforts to address law enforcement challenges that include mental health, substance abuse, and illegal marijuana cultivation. Thank you again so much for being with us, Sheriff Dicus.
Absolutely, Yvette. Thank you.
So before the break, we were talking about Bill 1599 and how that was developed to maybe revisit Prop 47 and bring it back to the voters for reconsideration.
Yes. So obviously that didn't happen. It was voted down at the Public Safety Committee level. So it will not come back to the voters. But I still think we have a chance with Assemblymember Salas's bill and following that forward and see if we can make some corrections to Prop 47. And we'll also see what Assembly members bring back. And there are a number of bills we're tracking across the board to make sure that those bills help us address some of these adjustments that we know that he needs and try to fix some things like homelessness and a lot of what I call quality of life issues that we're really seeing across our state.
Right. So when we talk about homelessness, what does that look like? And what is your department and what is your philosophy on addressing it?
So we have the Sheriff's Hope team. And it's the Homeless Outreach Proactive Enforcement Program. That's what HOPE stands for. But let's just take 2021 numbers, for instance. There's a little over 2,700 contacts, and actually more than that. It's more like almost 6,000 contacts that the HOPE team makes just in the year of 2021. But we use special software that allows for GPS location of these folks in terms of when we contact them. And when you break it down and don't do the repeated contacts, it boils down to about 2,700 contacts. Out of those 2,700 contacts, our HOPE team's been able to house 210 of them. So if you look at the remaining folks that are involved in there, it's about an even split with just over 1,000 that the Hope team attributes their homelessness to mental health issues and the other half to substance abuse issues. And those are the folks that don't want the help from the Hope team to put a roof over their heads. They want to stay in the conditions that they're staying in. Now, if we're being reasonable and talking about this, some of them have difficulty understanding the type of shape they're in, but they may not rise to the level of being a danger completely to themselves or others, which prevents us from moving them into the Welfare and Institutions Code section that would allow us to take them in for treatment. So it's that gray area of folks that we see on the streets that, again, there are really not a lot of interventions for or infrastructure type capacities to be able to take them and house them with. If somebody wants to be housed, though, the Hope team is pretty successful in being able to put a roof over their heads.
So what does that infrastructure look like as it stands today for those that do suffer from mental health challenges and your Hope team is able to interact with and, garner their buy-in to participate?
Well, definitely a much larger number of beds across any jurisdiction to be able to house these folks so they can be treated. Oftentimes, and it's not the Department of Behavioral Health's fault or our doctors in our emergency rooms or anything else. They're just frankly overwhelmed and there just aren't enough beds. So somebody that we put in for a 72-hour evaluation are getting seen by a medical professional. And it's really just more of, taking this almost like a traffic cop and sending people in the quickest direction and trying to get them some level of help. There just isn't enough out there. So getting more beds in this environment, and when I talk about conservatorships and things that really force people to kind of look at their situations and have doctors help them and bring some level of clarity to their situation.
Right. So clearly there's no compassion in allowing these people to deteriorate on the streets, right? I mean, if they have mental health challenges or substance abuse challenges, they need assistance, right? It's very heartbreaking to see, we see it every day. But what systems and resources exist today that could better assist, these people and help them get on the right track?
Well, Yvette, we're blessed in most of our communities to have a great faith-based and community-based coalition that helps us with a number of these things. But those faith-based and community-based groups face the same challenges. They can't make a person stay there. That's why I'm saying that government needs to take a level of responsibility of this. And the capacity building in terms of that transition, I keep saying halfway house because I think most of us are kind of familiar with that term. But that's where these community-based and faith-based organizations can really be a force multiplier in terms of that capacity for transition. Mentors that take these people to and from doctor's appointments. Because when you have these conversations, it boils down to a roof over their head and transportation and a job, and then the capacity for handling all of those things. So having these groups assist us in that would be tremendous, but we also need to work with these groups and build capacity for them as well. They're willing to help and they're very good at it, but we also have to have data-driven, what I call data-driven decision-making. Who is the most effective? Which program is the most effective? How do we know where to invest our money that we are getting from the state in certain circumstances or locally in terms of philanthropy? How do we invest that in the best way possible to get the best outcomes? And a lot of that data-driven decision-making isn't currently available. I mentioned the software the Hope team uses. We need more examples of that so that folks sitting in chairs like me trying to put budget dollars where they need to be placed on behalf of the community are really making the best decisions we possibly can.
And so how do facilities such as Patton Hospital, right? How can they receive the necessary funds to update the hospital to better serve those that need those resources?
Well, I think places like Patton are severely impacted. It used to be if somebody was incompetent to stand trial, someone would have to wait in jail for up to an entire year before they'd be able to go to a facility like Patton to be able to be returned to that competency. So the Department of State hospitals, and I'm just going to give you an example here, we've partnered with them for return to competency programs inside corrections. So we take what I'm calling more low-hanging fruit in terms of the mental health diagnosis of a person. And let's just say, for instance, if it were me in the system, that Shannon maybe didn't understand what a courtroom was. What did it look like? Who was the judge? Who are the attorneys? What's actually going on? So you have some cognitive issues potentially. We are able to use these return to competency programs here locally And instead of waiting a whole year, we can return these folks around to competency in somewhere between 50 and 60 days, much faster, much better for the human condition to be able to do that. But again, if the state would invest in places like Patton State Hospital, Patton, there's a lot of employees over there that are working, trying to do the best with the same capacity issues we're speaking of, but in antiquated facilities. I mean, you could just drive by that place and see there have been little investment in terms of that place. It still looks like it did, years and years ago. And the state's got to invest, unfortunately, for them in prison systems, the Department of State hospitals, and build their capacity while we're also trying to build local capacity.
And so
and I'm sorry I keep driving the capacity home, but
Right.
it really is what's lacking.
Right. And so that capacity comes down to funding, right? And so how can we as a community or as voters insist that these tax dollars are invested in these existing facilities to update them and take them to a place that will better serve the community and those that need it best?
Well, it certainly goes to with our voting power. And again, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. We're American citizens. We should be able to speak our minds and have different opinions. And at the last moment, if we're confronted with evil, we go back to back and we fight together. I would certainly hope with things that we're seeing in the world happen right now that it's uniting. And it's my expectation, as our department and certainly all of us as voters are really voting on things that help the human condition, not really exemplify taking sides, but try to help the human condition as a whole. And I think if we focus on the human condition as really the base platform, then I think we're doing something.
Right. So I recently read a story, a very heartbreaking story actually, about a woman who had given birth on the sidewalk and walked away from her newborn infant. She was known in the community for her mental health challenges. And it's very sad to see that it had come to that. But how would your efforts respond or prevent this from happening in our region?
Well, so Yvette, that's a perfect point. And I'm so glad you brought up that example, because can you only imagine that lady? This isn't the first time that community saw her. I guarantee that. And I have the same problem. There's a lot of times sheriffs really across the state get badmouthed because we have in custody deaths and terrible situations just like the one you described. But whatever happens is that investigative reporter talk to the families. How many times have they been to an emergency room? How many times have they been to a crisis center? How many times has that lady in your example reached out for help and because of these capacity issues that we described, didn't get the help she needed? And that's truly what's going on. I think if we were to bring those stories out, right now the story is just somebody died in custody and we're not doing a very good job and we could be doing better. It's much deeper than that. It's a problem. It's a problem for families. Can you imagine being in a family that somebody has mental health issues and they're asking for help over and over again, and then ultimately the police get involved as the last ditch effort? It shouldn't be that way. And unfortunately, that's what we're seeing day in and day out. And the example that you gave, I am quite sure there are a number of places. And please don't take this as saying doctors are the problem or anything else. They're not. They want to help these people. It's just, where do they send them?
Right. So in this case, how would a conservatorship have helped this woman and her infant child?
Well, number one, we would have realized that she's having a difficult time, can't function on her own, and be put in a facility that is trying to help her achieve that level of consciousness, and at the same time taking care of her medical needs. And again, that medical environment, not a jail environment. Now, of course, if there are crimes associated with this, I think we can strike a balance in those things. And that's why I think it's pertinent to work with the governor on this care court idea and have our bench officers really being the meter for those things and hearing from the professionals that relates to the case and handling that person. And then perhaps in her case, she could have been in a much better environment, treating her mental health issue or substance abuse issue, and certainly prenatal care and all of those other things that would have gone along with her having a child.
And is that something that the HOPE team would have been a part of engaging?
Absolutely. If that person wanted help or she had degraded to the point where we had to take custody of her, now here's the issue. Would she be able to stay in the facility longer than the 72-hour hold we're able to do as law enforcement? I don't know. That's where we go back to the doctors that are working with them, trying to essentially put these people in the right places and get them the right help, and where that becomes difficult.
Well, it sounds like you have a much more tailored approach towards those that are suffering with mental health challenges and are struggling with substance abuse problems versus those that have committed violent crimes like murder, assault, and rape?
Absolutely, and there is a difference. The people that we're talking about that are misdemeanor level people, that's where programs are going to help them the most. And one of the things we've invested in, we have an entire command, which is called the Community Services and Reentry Command, and HOPE actually falls underneath that. So when you look at the Sheriff's Department resources that we have available to us in this county, it's more of an end-to-end look at the person. Our hope is that we can start addressing them while they're in custody. I have a FACE program. And what's different about FACE in terms of taking a look at things, I actually have local counselors are folks that are trying to get their hours for counseling in the social work programs that they're in. They get hours by coming and working with us, and they're students from Cal State San Bernardino and Cal Baptist University. So they're getting their clinical hours, but they're addressing maybe trauma that a person's experienced that may be contributing to their criminogenic activities. So we start there. And then imagine once we address that, now we can start addressing the basic needs. Do you have family support? Do you have a vehicle? Do you have a job? What do you have on the outside? What's available? And where can we come in with those transitional services? So we're doing the best with what we can. And it's not one of those things where I'm a cop that says lock everybody up. I think it's critical to public safety that we have strong programs like this and we return these people to competency because there's nothing else for them in the current environment that we're in.
Well, it sounds to me like you have a very compassion-centered philosophy, which is just wonderful, especially in today's environment and the realities that exist all around us. So moving forward, let's talk about the illegal marijuana industry versus the legal marijuana industry. What regulations exist to protect the environment of our 20,000 square miles, and how is it different to those that are growing legal marijuana in our region?
So Yvette, this is really complicated, and this is also, just in my opinion, another cart before the horse in terms of state responsibilities. With the Bureau of Cannabis Control and how this is laid out, there just isn't enough folks to do all the things they need to do, whether it's regulatory requirements and testing the materials that are being grown legally. And the reason we see an illegal market explode, about the time voters voted in cannabis and saying it was legal for people to use, it was about approximately $1,200 a pound for marijuana. So somebody that wants to get into the cannabis industry, again, completely legal, could get in there. And when you think about paying California taxes and doing all the things right, facilities and a number of things, $1,200 a pound, there was a significant profit margin there for the folks wanting to do this legally. But Proposition 64 took illegal cultivation of cannabis and took it from a felony to a misdemeanor. So think about that. $1,200 a pound, everybody's going to want to get in on that action to some degree. Major criminal enterprise, cartels, I mean, you name it. And there are people that are entrepreneurs trying to go out and do that, but avoiding permits and taxes and all of these things. So what we've seen is a big quality of life problem for us, particularly in our deserts, LA County, San Bernardino County, and Riverside County, is these illegal grows have exploded everywhere. And on average, even a small grow makes about $1 million. Well, when we come in, because this is a misdemeanor, that grower is really only looking at a $500 fine. So the state has created a risk versus reward situation with very little risk and very high reward. And now what you're seeing, that $1,200 a pound inputting the illegal market into play, that $1,200 a pound has now been driven somewhere around $300 a pound. So people doing this legally have seen their profit margins cut substantially in terms of trying to do this, and the illicit market has just exploded. Also, in terms of California, little or no penalties. So we're seeing a lot of that cultivation get shipped out of state where the penalties are much harsher.
Okay, so are there health concerns or environmental concerns that are associated with these illegal marijuana operations?
Sure. Not too long ago, there have been a number of studies, one that comes to mind particularly where a doctor went to legal dispensaries and purchased marijuana. They tested the marijuana afterwards, and a little over 70% of that marijuana came back with carbofuran in it. Carbofuran is a pesticide that exists across the border, not here in the United States. It's not even legal. So that was legal dispensaries. The only place you could do that is get it from illegal cultivations. So there's a direct source problem there, and also quality control if we're ingesting those types of things that are being introduced into that market. And again, it's not the Bureau of Cannabis Control's fault. They need to be much larger to regulate the industry, and there needs to be better legislation to drive people from the illicit market to the legal market. And what I mean by that, I'm sure if you said, oh, let's change it back to felonies, you're going to get equity issues that, a lot of minorities would be arrested over this, and a number of things that we talk about as a societal problem. But if that's the case and we want to leave it a misdemeanor, then you need to have a financial penalty that's equally going to hit them in the pocketbook because of the vast amounts of money they're making. So there's two things that, again, I'm going to give you the hopeful part of this. We have Senator Caballero, who's introducing legislation specifically related to our resources. So water's being stolen, illegal wells are being drilled. In the Bay Area, if it doesn't rain for 2 days, what do you hear? We're in drought. This illegal cultivation and water getting pumped out of our aquifers and our deserts has been occurring for a long time now. The operation that I'm involved in, Hammer Strike, trying to take some of these down, we're going to be coming into this summer an entire year of doing this job. I haven't heard anything from Sacramento coming down to try to assist us in this or deal with the water getting pumped out of the ground. So we're creating a drought situation, and people's wells are standing up, and a number of things. So Senator Caballero has taken this on. I hope we can get some traction on that bill. And then when we talk about these larger penalties, our local legislator, Smitty Smith, is taking that on and has introduced an assembly bill that will up the amount of fines that these people that are growing illicitly would have to pay, that are much more commensurate with the profits that they're making.
Well, also, I recently read a report that claims that nearly $1 million were seized by your department. Are these monies that were intercepted, were they funds that were aimed at purchasing from illegal marijuana growers, or what exactly does that look like?
So Yvette, I'm glad you asked that. There have been a number of articles written about this, some by investigative reporters that have received the actual court orders and a number of things and are much more into the weeds as to what we do. So as the sheriff and the sheriff's department, I'm trying to protect the public by following illicit weed only, not legal weed. I've got 3 places in this county, Hesperia in our industrial area for medical marijuana delivery, Needles, and Adelanto, that allow this. I don't go into those areas and bother any folks that are trying to do this legally. I specifically stay away from it, and I remind those cities that do it, and I've been called, hey, this person didn't pay their permit. I remind them, once you make it legal, that becomes a code enforcement problem and more of a municipal problem, not a sheriff's department problem. So I make sure, because it's important to me, that anybody that's in that business legally doesn't have to look over their shoulder or think their sheriff's going to raid their facilities. Because if they're doing it legally, they have no worries. But following the illicit market, that led us to the armored cars that you're talking about, and a service provider that essentially has a foot in both camps. And there are service providers that are needed in this industry. It's mostly cash. So armored cars, banks, and those types of things are certainly needed. It's just the service providers have to be just like the growers. They have to stay completely 100% on the legal side of the market. If they don't, then that convolutes it, because agencies like mine that are following just the illicit weed, they're going to run into problems if they have a foot in both camps. And that's what I believe is happening in this specific case.
Well, thank you for talking about that and sharing that. So looking forward, what advice do you have for voters that want to see laws that favor victims of crimes and thefts and want to support those legal marijuana growers moving forward?
Well, again, this goes back to us as voters. We got to know what we're voting about. And there's a number of things that have come across the desks of legislators and the governor that have been signed into a law that are far more suspect-centric than victim-centric. We need to be a society that cares about their victims. And a victim could be a property owner that a marijuana grow is being grown on and without their knowledge. A victim could be that business we spoke about earlier that's having shoplifting event occur after reoccurrence over and over again. And a victim could be a person that's having mental health or substance abuse issues that don't even realize, based on their level of consciousness, what's happening to themselves because they're so intoxicated or just from a mental health perspective can't realize their own conditions. And it's high time that we start building those capacities. Again, sorry to drive that into the ground, that we can take care of these people in a different manner. And I think if we look across the aisles of both political parties, I think we have solutions. We can build the capacity, then we can do Prop 47 like things because there's a place for these people. Right now, the only place for them is on the streets, and that's not the human condition that I think we were all looking for in terms of our friends and neighbors.
And so what recommendations do you have for us as voters to maybe bring up these questions to our representatives moving forward and say, hey, we want to see some of these things revisited, or we don't like what's happening? What recommendations do you have?
Talk to your legislators, read what you're voting for, talk to your local law enforcement agencies and your chiefs of police and the sheriff's department, and use them as a resource. A lot of highly impassioned decisions are being made without actual knowledge of what the boots on the ground see. And I think if we do that together, we're doing something.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us today, Sheriff Shannon Dicus. I look forward to having you on in the future.
Thank you, Yvette. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. So everyone listening, look for us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Check us out on scbrtalk.com. And don't forget to download the free live streaming app on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Don't miss my interview with Dr. Samir Summarani, a cardiovascular specialist. He was born and raised in Lebanon and is trilingual in English, French, and Lebanese. He is a very thorough and caring physician and believes in the value of patient education. He also has a personal interest in informational technology and electronic devices. He is always looking for ways to better utilize and improve patient care and medical practices. His clinical interests and experience include the evaluation and advanced treatment of structural heart disease with non-surgical interventions, TMVR, Watchman device, valve-in-valve, PFO closure, evaluation and treatment of peripheral arterial disease, chronic venous insufficiency and veno-occlusive disease, and evaluation and treatment of pulmonary hypertension. Dr. Summarani has a strong background in care management and treatment, including advanced therapies of heart failure. He is a specialist in cardiac CT, cardiac MRI, echocardiogram 2D, 3D, nuclear imaging, and vascular imaging. Next week, we will have Dr. John Bunkers, a Southern California native who attended South Hills High School, attended Cal Poly University Pomona, and graduated from the University of Pacific School of Dentistry in 1978 with a doctoral in dental surgery. In his career, John has served as an associate professor of restorative dentistry at UCLA School of Dentistry from 1978 to 1981. He was the founder and managing partner of the San Dimas Dental Group from 1980 to 2020, which included 6-doctor multi-specialist practice, was the vice president of the American Academy of Clear Aligners from 2017 and 2020, and was recognized as a Diamond Plus dentist and 1% world provider of Invisalign dentistry in 2021. Today, John is the administrator and moderator for the AIR Institute, a group that provides cutting-edge technology of the next generation of dentistry, including sleep dentistry, treatment of obstructive sleep apnea, and laser rejuvenation. In addition to his dedication to providing the latest in dentistry, he is part of a successful business group of investors known as the Colonies Partners, who together purchased 400 acres of mixed-use land in Upland, California from 1996 to present. John has 2 beautiful daughters and a lovely granddaughter named Lily. Don't miss it next week, friends. We'll see you then.
This has been the Southern California Business Report with Yvette Walker on KMET 1490 AM, FM 98.1, and ABC News Radio affiliate, a show dedicated to highlighting successful Southern California businesses and the people behind them.